So in this next part, we're going to create a CRUD app using everything we've covered so far in the tutorial. And we're going to keep this simple. We'll not use a server or database, just local storage. So first things first, let's create a new app. We're going to navigate to the directory where we want it to be installed. In my case, desktop React. And we're going to do npx create React app. And I'm gonna name mine CRUD app tutorial. And we're just gonna wait for this to be done. Once that's done, we're gonna open our project in a code editor and start up the application with npm start. Good, all looks alright. So now the first thing we're going to do is initiate our local storage with some initial movies. And first, let's get rid of some of this stuff that we don't need. So we're gonna do local storage, set item, and our variable is gonna be called movies. And let's define our array just above it. Movies. And we're gonna have name. Let's say Pulp Fiction. And genre. And let's have another one. The Shining. Now let's set movies as the JSON stringified version of the array that we just made. So that's gonna be JSON stringify and movies. Now let's delete what comes by default in the project here, so all these we're not gonna need. And let's give a title to our app. Let's say Movie Finder. Next, we're gonna read our movies from local storage, and we're gonna do this in a component will mount. So let's create a method. Movies equals to JSON, and we're gonna have JSON.parse in front of it. Because if we're not, we're gonna get the JSON stringified version in the console, and we want the JS one. So JSON parse local storage get item movies, and we're gonna log it out in the console. Let's take a look. And we can see we have an array here. Next, we're gonna create the state that we're gonna store the array in. And instead of reading and writing to local storage, we're going to interact with the state to make things simpler. So firstly, let's create our constructor method. Props. And here super props. I'm going to do this, not state equals to, and we'll have an empty array here. Next, in component will mount, let's use set state to set the movies to the movie we got from local storage. Next, let's go to our render method. And let's type, we're gonna use curly braces and do this state dot movies dot map movie, and we're gonna use an arrow function, an ES6 syntax. Here we're gonna do return a div with the key of movie.name. And inside we're gonna have divs. With movie.name and movie.genre. And if we go to the browser, we can see that we're getting them from there. So just to make this cleaner, let's create a method where we're gonna get our movies. So we're just gonna make a method called getMovies. And we'll just paste what we wrote in component will mount. Copy and paste this. And this as well. And in component will mount, we're gonna delete everything and set this get movies. Let's see if it still works. Yeah, there we go. This is how we read from local storage. Let's move on to the delete functionality. So firstly, we're gonna create a new component to make things more modular and have the code a bit more understandable. So we're going to do that, creating a new file, and we're going to call it movie item. This is just going to render the movies on the page. So let's copy the paste from here and get rid of the stuff that we don't need. And also the methods here, we're not going to need those. And let's rename it to movie item. Next, let's add a delete button here. And let's get the name and the genre from the props. Equals this dot props. Save it up, and now let's go back to our main file and import our component. Movie item from movie item.js. this here. Alright, and let's replace the code here with the new component that we just created. Movie item. And there are still a few things that we need to get rid of in here. So we just need the divs. So we're gonna take this out. No, not the return. Just like that. This as well. Oh. Alright, and we're not gonna need the key here because we're gonna put it in our app.js file, and the props we're gonna pass into our component in our app.js. So let's go here and let's multi-line this, and we're gonna have a key of movie.name and name again movie.name and genre movie.genre. Save it up and refresh the page and see if it works. Yes, and we can see we have everything displayed here. Next, we're going to create the onDelete method, which is going to take name in as a parameter, and we're also gonna pass it into our component. So onDelete, name here, and let's just console log the name. And we're also going to pass it on here to our component. Right. Next, we're going to have to bind it in our constructor, since we're going to use setState in the method. So it's going to be this that onDelete equals to this that onDelete that bind this. And so next, in the movie item file, we're going to create a click handler for the delete button. So let's have it on click. We're gonna have, oh, sorry, this dot onDelete, and then we bind the method in the constructor again. So let's create a constructor here. Super props. This dot onDelete equals this dot onDelete dot bind this. So next we're gonna define the onDelete method. So onDelete. We're gonna have this dot props on delete. We're gonna have this, and we're gonna pass him the props name. Props name. And now, if we look in the browser, we're gonna see that every time we click on the button, the name of the movie is being logged in the console. Next, we're gonna write the code that it's actually gonna delete the product. So first, we're gonna have to change the code a bit because we want to have the getMovies method to just return the list of movies. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna copy everything from getMovies. And put it into component will mount. And in getMovies, we're gonna, oh, wait a second. Yeah, so let's just copy everything here. In getMovies, we're gonna have return. We're gonna have the list returned. Okay. And now let's write some code in the onDelete method. So the way we're gonna do this, we're gonna filter on when the button is gonna be clicked. We're gonna filter the movies, and we're gonna display only the ones that haven't been clicked. So we're gonna have a constant movies, which is gonna get the movies. And another one, we're gonna call it filtered movies. It's gonna be equal to movies filter, and we're gonna use an ex6 function, movie, an arrow function, and we're gonna return movie name. So everything that's not equal to the name. And let's just console log it so you see if it works. Yeah, so yeah, I have a spelling mistake here. Alright. No. Oh. Alright, so as you can see, I clicked on Pulp Fiction, and what we get is everything that's not Pulp Fiction. So in this case, just The Shining. Next, we're gonna have our onDelete method set the state of the movies to the filtered movies. So this, let's set state and here we're gonna have movies and filtered movies. And our initial value in the state, we're gonna have it get the list from local storage. So in here, we're just gonna copy this. Alright. And lastly, we'll have the getMovies method return the list of movies from the state. So getMovies, it's gonna be return this at state.movies. And let's see if everything works. Yeah, so now when you delete, when you click delete, they go out of the page. And lastly, let's just style it a little bit. So let's just put everything in here. Alright. So in here we're gonna put a class name. We don't need this or this. No, we actually do. Let's keep it in. Okay, so let's put a class name on it. Let's call it movie list. And here, just to make it look prettier, I'm gonna have it say movie and genre. And also in app.js, we're gonna want the title. I'm gonna be able to style it. So another class name in here. I'm gonna call it title. And let's go in here. And I already have the code for the CSS, so you can just pause if you want to copy it. If not, I would encourage you to just fiddle around and play with your own styles. And there we go. Oh, something's wrong here. Alright. And this is how it looks. So when you click delete, it goes away.
Now, let's write the code to add a new product. Let's create a new component. So under sources, let's create a new file and call it add new movie.js. Okay. And we can copy the content from here to this new component and delete what we don't need. We can delete this line, keep the return and a div. Okay. Now we have to change the name of the component to our component, so add new movie, and here as well add new movie. And here inside our return method, we want to create a form with two input fields, let's say name and genre, and when the form will be submitted, we would create a new movie. So let's get started by adding a span and an input field. So let's create our form. here we would create a div, and inside the div first a span that will just would say name, and then the input itself. We can copy this div and paste it here and just change this to genre. We also will need a button that will submit our form. So let's say add new movie and close the div. On our form, of course, it will have an onSubmit method, so we can add it now. So let's say onSubmit equals to this dot onSubmit, and don't forget that we have to bind this method to our constructor. So let's create our constructor here. So constructor, passing props, type super, props, close it, and then of course bind it to the constructor. So this dot onSubmit equals to this dot onSubmit dot bind this. Let's also create the onSubmit method that it will take an event as a parameter, and don't forget to prevent the page to refresh itself. So when we create our method here onSubmit, we want to pass an event. Then the first thing to do is prevent event that prevent default. Don't forget its function. As I was telling you previously in the video, in order to get the value of our inputs, we need to use refs. So let's add the ref attribute to our inputs. So here I would say ref equals, and open brackets, so name, it's an array function, so this dot name equals name, and copy this and do the same thing for this input. Just want to replace this with genre. Okay, let's go back to our method and console.log the values of our input fields, and remember to add .value. So console.log, so this .name .value, because we want the value, not the HTML line. So and this .genre .value, and don't forget to close it. Now, let's open our app.js and import our new component. So let's copy this line and import add new movie from add new movie. Okay, second we have to add our component in the render method. So let's add it here after the h1. So add new movie component and just save it. And inside our component we have to pass a method, the onAdd method, as a prop. So let's add onAdd equals this dot onAdd, by this point the onAdd method doesn't exist, so let's go and create it. We can create it, let's create it here after the onDelete method. Oh, sorry, here. So onAdd, And for now, let's just console.log name and genre. Can save it and refresh it. Two small errors that we need to fix right now is place this divot button, and here I forgot to close this. So now if I save it, it will be fine. The next step that we will want to do is open app.js and of course import our new component. So add new movie, and of course here from add new movie component. Okay, second we have to add our component in the render method. So let's go to our render method and add it here after the h1. So add new movie, and let's close it here. Inside this component we have to pass a method on add as a prop. So let's go and add on add equals this dot on add. By this point, of course, this method doesn't exist, so we're gonna have to create it. So on add, open brackets, let's bind it to the constructor. So let's copy this line and can replace this with on add. If you go back to our method here, we have to pass the name and the genre of the movie we want to add as parameters. So let's go ahead and pass those two. And for now we want to console.log the name and the genre, just to see if it works. Okay, let's open our console and let's type in here hello and world and new movie, and we can see that it's logged in our console, but it's displaying what the user typed in, so we need to add more functionality to our components. Now let's open our add new movie component and replace the console.log, this one, replace it with this.props.onAdd, our method, and we want the name and the genre, so this is okay. And if we go back to our app.js, we have to change this console.log. So we would use the const movies, our list with movies, and use this.getMovies, our method that we previously created. And now we have to use the push method, so movies, our list.push, and inside we want to push object that would take the name and the genre as parameters. Don't forget to close this here, and of course we need to change the state, so this.set state to our movies list. Okay, now we can add a new movie by adding here, press add new movie, and you would see that the movie is created. The last thing we want to do is to clear those inputs after we submit our forms. So let's go back to our component and add here in our method, we can say this.name.genre and set it to an empty string, and this.name.value, and this dot genre dot value and set it to an empty string, and we can give this form a class name of how did we call this one? Call it movie list. Let's give it the same just to look nice. Let's save it. And right now it should when we submit, yeah, it clears up the inputs. So let's continue to our last part from CRUD, the edit. So to do this we have to first open this movie item, and let's start by adding a button right next to our delete button that would edit our movie. So on click we would use on edit, and let's say here edit. So we will use this dot edit. Yes. Don't forget to bind the method to the constructor. So on edit equals this dot on edit dot bind this. Let's add a new isEdit state property to our constructor. So here in our constructor we can add this state. We will set the default of isEdit to false. Close it here. And by using the state, this property will help us to check if we are just viewing the movie or editing it. When we create the onEdit method, we want to set the isEdit to true. So let's go and create the onEdit method. We have this error because we don't have the method, so let's create it. So this dot set state, and isEdit is gonna be set to true. Okay. Now we will tell React what to render based upon what state we are into. So in our render method in here we have to set the state to isEdit to true. So let's return object, and the first thing that we would do is this dot state that isEdit. And now we have to make an if else ES6 syntax. So if it's true, want to do this, else want to do this. Let's first take care of if not here. So if we're not in the edit mode, React will render what it was already there. So let's move the code from here in here okay. Actually we have to return a div. All of it has to be in a div, so we can go and create it now. Okay. If we are in the edit mode, we want to use the inputs that we created previously in add new movie component. So let's go and copy them. Let's copy our form and paste it in here. Okay, let's format it a bit. Okay, we have to replace this button to save, of course. So now when we click on the edit button, the text box will become an empty input. And if we click save, it will show up on the page. The text field seems like it transforms to an input, and our save button will show up on the page. We have to add a different method here. We want to add on edit submit method, and the first thing we want to do is to bind this method to the constructor. So on edit submit, what we want to do, of course, is to create this method. So let's just copy this and paste it here. Now we have an error because it doesn't know about this method. So now we have it, and the thing that we want to do is to pass in event and then set event that prevent the fault. Okay, and let's call this .props on edit submit and pass the name and the value. So this .props on edit submit, and in here we have to pass this name value and this genre value. Okay, so back in the app.js, we have to create our onEditSubmit button method. So onEditSubmit, we're gonna pass in the name and the genre, and we want to console.log just to see if it works. Name and genre. Of course, now that we created this method, we have to also bind it to the constructor. So on edit submit, and this on edit submit bind this. And now let's go to the map method and pass in here the on edit submit method. So this on edit, the same as we did with the onDelete function. So if we test it now, we're going to see that we're gonna get the values. So let's click edit and say pulp and just type action and hit save. We're gonna see that in the console it logs out. So let's set the default values of the textboxes. So let's go back to our movie item.js, and in here next to the ref we want to add a default value to the name. This one is genre, sorry. And in here we want to set the default value of this to name. Yes, and back to our app.js. We want to write the code that will actually edit the product. So let's delete this for now. And we're gonna create a variable, so let movies. Our list will be that this.get movies. So we'd get the movies, and for each movie we'll say that if the movie name is the same with the one we pass in, then we will set the movie name and the genre to the new value of the input. So movies equals to movies.map, and then we will use an arrow function, so movies arrow function, and we will say that if the movie name, so movie.name, equals to the one we pass in name, we will set the movie name to the value that we just got and the genre. Okay, don't forget to return our movie. So return movie. And of course we have to set the state. So this.set state to our movies list. Yep, and after we submit, we need to change the state of isEdit to false. So let's go here on our method. Oh, I saw an error here. It should be movie, not movies. And another thing that we want to do now is to go to our movie item component, and in here we have to change the state of isEdit to false. So let's say this that set state, and isEdit is set to false. Okay. The last thing to do is we need to pass the original name, because we're going to use that to find a product amongst all the products in the list. So we're going to pass in here as a third argument this .props, that name. And if we go back to our app.js, in here we can pass a third argument, let's call it original name, and we can replace this one here with the original name. So if the movie name equals to the original name, we're gonna set the name to the new value and the new genre that is set up. So let's go ahead and test it. Can edit this one and type in Harry Potter, let's say, and then I don't know, let's say it's a comedy, and let's hit save. You can see that it's here saved, and we can also edit this one just to see if it works. So let's type Star Trek and I don't know, sci-fi, and it's saved, and you can see that it's working.